Amara adjusted the ghillie on her head, staring at her reflection in the gilded mirror of the master bedroom. Tonight was a dinner for Obina's business partners, and everything had to be perfect. For 2 years, they had been the golden couple of their village in Enugu. Obina was a charismatic importer whose ships always came in, and Amara was the beauty who graced his arm, managing his home with the grace of a queen. Their love felt unshakable, a fortress built on shared laughter and whispered midnight promises. Yet, as she smoothed the expensive lace of her blouse, a familiar hollowness settled in her stomach. The perfection was a veneer. Beneath the surface of their affluent life, a silence was growing, a silence that filled the empty nursery down the hall. Obina entered the room, his presence filling the space. He kissed her neck, his touch warm, but his eyes lingered for a fraction of a second too long on her flat stomach. "You look beautiful, my love," he said, but the words felt rehearsed. The guests downstairs were already drinking his wine, toasting to a success. But Amara knew that in their culture, a man's success was incomplete without an heir. The clock was ticking, and with every month that passed, the golden sheen of their marriage was beginning to rust. The dinner party was a success by all accounts, except for the one that mattered. Obina's mother, Mama Ada, sat at the head of the table, her gaze sharp as a hawk's. She didn't look at the food, she looked at Amara's waist. As the guests departed, leaving a scent of expensive cigars and perfume in the air, Mama Ada cornered her son in the study. Amara, claiming the table in the dining room, could hear the low hum of their conversation through the mahogany doors. She didn't need to press her ear against the wood to know the subject of their conversation. "She is dry, Obina. A garden that yields no fruit is just a patch of weeds. How long will you wait? Your mates are sending their sons to university, and you are playing house with a barren woman?" Amara froze, a crystal glass trembling in her hand. She waited for Obina to defend her, to shout his mother down as he had done in the first year. Instead, there was a pause, a long, suffocating silence, followed by a heavy sigh. "Give her time, Mama," he said, but his voice lacked the fire of conviction. It was the first crack in the foundation, a subtle shaft in loyalty that sent a cold shiver down Amara's spine. Their defense was merely a delay, not a denial. The following month brought a flurry of activity, but only for Amara. The pressure from Mama Ada had metastasized into a frantic schedule of medical appointments and spiritual consultations. Amara drank bitter herbal concoctions that made her gag and sat in sterile waiting rooms for hours, subjecting to invasive tests that left her feel like a specimen rather than a woman. The doctors, kind but weary, found nothing physically wrong with her, classifying her case as unexplained infertility. They suggested that Obina come in for analysis, a standard procedure. When Amara brought this up Owedena, the temperature in her room dropped 20 degrees. Obina slammed his fork down, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. "Me," he scoffed, his pride flaring like a wounded animal. "I am a land, Amara. My father had 7 children. His father had 10. The blood is strong. Do not insult my lilies to cover your own feelings." He stood up and left the table, leaving his meal untouched. Amara sat alone, shrinking into her chair. The refusal wasn't just about pride, it was an insertion of power. By refusing to be tested, he successfully isolated her as the sole problem. The burden of their childlessness was no longer shared. It was a heavy stone tied exclusively around her neck. The emotional distance soon manifested physically. Obina began returning home late, blaming shipments stuck at the port or late meetings with investors. Amara tried to be understanding, playing the role of the supportive wife, but the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the lateness, it was the change in his demeanor. He was often distracted, smiling at messages on his phone before quickly locking the screen when she entered the room. The intimacy that had defined their early years evaporated, replaced by a cold, polite coexistence.
One evening, as she was sorting the laundry, she picked up one of his white shirts. It smelled merely of a perfume. She didn't know. Something florid and cheap, cloying and sweet. It wasn't the scent of a business meeting. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to confront him, to scream and demand answers, but fear paralyzed her. In her position as the barren wife, she had no leverage. If she accused him, he could easily turn it around, claiming he started confidence elsewhere because her home was empty. She watched his head scrubbing the collar vigorously as if she could wash away the reality of what was happening. She chose silence, hoping they would efface, unaware that her silence would be interpreted as submission. The invitation cards for their 5th anniversary were embossed with gold leaves and testament doubling its wealth. 5 years of union, they read, a mockery of the reality inside the house. Mama Jabba had insisted on a grand celebration. We must show the world that my son is prospering, she has declared. Mara Smith Weeks planning the event, supervising caterers and decorators, trying to bury the sorrow in logistics. She convinced herself that this party could be a turning point, a chance to rekindle the spark. Maybe, just maybe, if she made him proud enough that he would come back to her. On the morning of an anniversary, Abino was unusually elevated. He hummed "Why Save Him" in compliment Amara's dress selection. Tonight will be a night to remember, he told her, adjusting its complex. Amara's heart swelled with fragile hope. She mistook his excitement for affection, his anticipation for a renewed commitment to their vows. She didn't see the predatory glint in his eyes or the nervousness in his hand. She was busy arranging flowers, unaware that she was decorating a stage for her own executions. The house filled with guests, music, and laughter. But the air was thick with tension that only Amara seemed unable to perceive. The party was in full swing. The garden was lit with fairy lights, and a live band played high-life music to keep the guests dancing. Amara's regulated room claimed the preferred hostess, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. She looked for Odina and found him near the entrance, taking his watch repeatedly. He wasn't looking at her, he was looking at the gate. Suddenly, the music faltered as a marveling wave swept over the crowd. The heavy iron gate flung open, and a black SUV with tinted windows rolled up the driveway, crowded with a sea of guests. Urbana stood forward, a wide grin breaking across his face. He opened the possum to draw it himself. Out stepped a young woman, perhaps 22, draped in expensive lace that did little to hide the providence for the elevator, a hostel of the kind. A moment when Nico looked around with a mix of arrogance and fright. She placed a possessor head on her stand and then played to her arm through a Venus arm. Or stood frozen near the birthday table, a tree of orders shaking with her head. The board seemed to tell on its axis. This wasn't just a mistress. This was a public declaration. The night to remember had just turned into a nightmare. Abida led Nico to the center of the hackery, grabbing the microphone for the stand fair leader. The tree make him everyone wish, but it didn't care. He looked drunk on power. My friends, family, he'd borne, his worth echoing off the compound walls. For 5 years I have prayed, I have worked, I have waited. He paused for the minute to think, looking directly at Mara, Eli still void of what? A man works for his legacy. A man works for the future. He raised Miko's hand high. And tonight, the future is here. Miko carried my son, the crowd erupted. Some in cheers later, but they brought a bill another hour, and the other in shocked to his purse. He has done what I thought was the other is to been in this house. She has proven my seed is strong. Everywhere with one finger. Her mama. In its soldier, he was stripping her of her dignity in front of everyone still knew, using her perceived failure as a pedestal for its ego. Amara felt the blood stream from his face, her legs threatening to give way. The tears died on as to sweetheart, sweet attention, a secret bothered. Did not scream, did not cry, though. The tears that threatened to fall evaporated in the heat of her indignation. She walked up to Malvina, her head held high. Nicholas looked at her, tightening her stomach, but Amara ignored her completely. She looked Bennett in the eye. You will mistake fertility for I tell you, Malvina, she said, her voice steady. Even though her tights were charlotte jumping, she turned on her heels and walked into the house. She didn't take everything, just her clothes, her jewelry, and the small savings she had kept him hidden back. She left the expensive kiss, the furniture that life had brought. Within 20 minutes, she was walking out the front end, dragging a single to his mind. The party was still going on, awkward and subdued, but she didn't look at that. As the heady arm grant click shared behind her, she felt a strange sensation and left her pay. Freedom! She was older and husbandless, but for the first time in years, she was waiting for a miracle that would never come. She was walking away from the lie. I'm gonna take a buff to the to a place where no one knew the name of Bina or the story of the barren white. She went to the small one-room apartment with peeling pay and a leak.
The first few weeks were a blur of grief. She cried until her eyes were swollen, mourning not just the marriage but the 5 years of her youth she felt she had wasted. But survival instinct kicked in. She found a job at a local primary school as a teaching assistant. The pay was meager, but being around children was surprisingly healing. She expected it to be painful, a reminder of what she lacked, but instead, she found she had a natural gift for nurturing. The children flocked to her, sensing her patience and warmth. She started to smile again. Real smiles, not the painted-on ones she had worn for Obina's business partners. She was poor, tired, and lonely, but she was rebuilding herself, brick by brick. She realized she was more than a vessel for a man's legacy. She was a woman with her own heart, her own mind, and her own future. Back in the mansion, the atmosphere had changed drastically. Naka had moved in with the subtlety of a hurricane. She despised the old-fashioned decor Amara had chosen and demanded immediate renovations. Obina, drunk on the promise of an heir, indulged her every whim. Expensive Italian marble replaced the wooden floors. Gaudy chandeliers replaced the taste with lighting. However, Naka was not the doting wife Amara had been. She complained about the heat, the staff, and the food. She refused to cook, demanding a professional chef. Mama Ada, initially thrilled, soon found herself sidelined. When she tried to give Neka advice on pregnancy, Neka snapped. I know what I'm doing, old woman. Leave me alone. Obina laughed it off as hormones, but the tension in the house was palpable. The peace Amara had cultivated was gone, replaced by the chaotic energy of a woman who knew she held the winning card. Obina was spending money faster than he was making it, trying to keep his pregnant trophy happy, unaware that the dynamic of his household had shifted permanently against him. Maneka's demands escalated from household items to financial control. I need to secure our son's future, she cooed one night, tracing a finger down Obina's chest. What if something happened to the business? We need accounts in my name for the baby. Obina, blinded by his obsession with the unborn child, agreed. He opened a joint account and gave her access to his primary savings. Meanwhile, Naneka was playing a dangerous game. When Obina was at work, the house had a visitor, a tall, shadowy man who entered through the back gate. The staff saw him but were too terrified of Naneka's temper to speak. She introduced him as her cousin, helping with the nursery, but the whispers grew. She was funneling money out, buying jewelry that she claimed was fake costume pieces, and taking long naps where she was not to be disturbed. Obina, exhausted from working double time to fund her lifestyle, noticed nothing. He saw only the belly that was growing larger, the symbol of his virility, unaware that it was the Trojan horse that would destroy him. 6 months after leaving Obina, Amara met Kalechi. He was the school administrator, a quiet man with kind eyes and a limp from a childhood accident. He didn't have Obina's money or charisma, but he listened when she spoke. They started with coffee after school, then dinners. He knew she was divorced, though she spared him the details of the infertility accusations. He fell for her gentleness. She fell for his respect. One night, after a simple dinner at his place, they were intimate. It was an act of love, not a scheduled attempt at procreation. 2 weeks later, Amara felt the familiar nausea. She assumed it was food poisoning or stress, but when her period didn't come, she took a test, her hand shaking. 2 lines, positive. She sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the stick in disbelief. For 5 years, she had told her she was broken. She had been discarded like trash. And yet, here it was. The realization hit her with the force of a tsunami. She was never barren. It had been Albion all along. Tears of vindication streamed on her face. The Naka's manipulation reached its peak. She presented Obinet with the stack of documents. The doctor says the stress of the city is bad for the baby, she lied. I want to buy that property in Abuja, the one near my family. Put it in my name so I can handle the renovations while you worked here. Obina hesitated. It was a significant portion of his liquidity. Do you not trust the mother of your son? She pouted, tears instantly springing to her eyes. After I gave up my body for you? Guilt-tripped and desperate to maintain the fantasy, Obina signed it. He transferred the deeds to the Abuja property and signed over power of attorney for emergency purposes regarding the business account. He thought he was securing his legacy. In reality, he was signing his own death warrant. As soon as the ink was dry, Nessa message turned, Cousin, it's done. Get the truck ready. Amara told Kalichi about the baby, terrified he would run. Instead, he dropped to his knees and kissed her stomach. Reaping with joy, he proposed on the spot. They married in a small, private ceremony, a stark contrast to the lavish wedding she had with Noe 9. Amara was blowing, her belly swelling rapidly. The irony was cosmic. The woman cast out for being barren was blossoming with life, love for them cherished. Meanwhile, the man who cast her out was living with a woman who despised him. Amar felt a pang of pity for Obina, but it was fleeting. She had a new life to protect. She realized that the curse of her first marriage was actually a blessing in disguise. If she had stayed, she would have wasted her life thinking she was the problem. She wrote a letter to Obina, intending to tell him the truth, to free him from his delusion. But she burned it. He had made his choice. Let him live with it. Obina was stressed. The business was suffering because he was draining capital to satisfy Neka. He came home one evening wanting comfort, but Neka pushed him away. I black hurt, she snapped. Don't touch me. This had become the norm. The intimacy had vanished the moment the ring was on her finger and the access goes were in her head. He, for the first time, doubt crept into his mind. He remembered Amara, how she would massage his shoulders, how she would listen to his day. He looked at her neck, scrolling on her phone, ignore him. He noticed she was always texting. Who is that? He asked. My sister, she lied smoothly, not looking up, but Obina saw the reflection in the window. It wasn't a contact name, sister. It was a man's name. Panic flared in his chest, but he suppressed it. She was carrying his son. That's all that mattered. He couldn't afford to be suspicious. He was too invested. Ovilan decided to come home early one day, a rare occurrence. He pulled into the driveway. He saw a man slipping outside gate, the same tall man the staff had whispered about. Ovilan rushed out of his car. Hey, you! He shouted. The man sprinted away, disappearing into the chaotic market street nearby. Obina stormed into the house. Who was that man? He roared. The nigger was painting her nails unbuffed. She said, Love plumber, she said lazily. The scent was leaking. Obina checked the sneaker was dry. Don't lie to me, Naneka. She stood up, her eyes blazing with a sudden, terrifying malice. Stop shouting, she hissed. You'll upset the baby. You want me to lose it? Is that what you want? She played the victim card perfectly. Only minutes later, the fear of losing the heir would override his lot. He apologized, but the seed of suspicion had taken root. He started checking bank alerts more closely. That night, Obina couldn't sleep. He logged onto his banking app, something he hadn't done in weeks because he trusted data with how fold his expenses. His eyes were wide in horror. The numbers were wrong, drastically wrong. Large sums had been transferred to an account that do not label consulting fees. He woke up in that. Where is this? Where is the money going? Not a bit even blink. I told you the Abuja house needs work. Contractors need to be paid. Obina looked at the dates at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. You a parent that's gone to sleep, but neck is stayed up, staring at the ceiling. The pieces were falling into place. The distance, the cousin, the money, a cold dread settled in his bones. He couldn't act, not until the baby was born. He needed the child. 2 weeks later, Nectar went into labor.
Omian rushed into the best private hospital in the state. He passed my hallway, sweating, crying. My mother was there, chanting prayers. After hours of screaming, the cry of a baby fills the air. Open burst into the room, tears of joy in his eyes. The nurse handed him the punk. "It's a boy," she said. Obian looked at the sun. His heart stopped. The baby was light-skinned, very light-skinned. Both Owen and Aneka were dark-skinned, but Janela Kimitroiki, he looked closer. The baby had a distinct nose-shape, flat and broad, not like his own aqua nose. He pushed the child away. He held the boy up. "My heir," he whispered. But when he looked at Aneka, she wasn't looking at the baby with love. She was looking at the door. Her eyes darted nervously. She didn't want to hold the child. She said, "I'm tired. Take him away." The suspense escalated the next morning. The baby named Junior by a hopeful and Orby lantern by the jaundice that was severe. The doctors were concerned. We need to do a blood exchange, transfuse it immediately. The pediatrician said, "We need to check the blood type of the parents to screen for antibodies." "I'll be joined immediately." "Take mine. I'm the father." The nurse took his blood, then the Neka seemed reluctant, but parents were wily, but she couldn't refuse in front of the youngest. Obian sat by the incubator, holding a tiny hand at the child. You discovered the name of the parents. You felt a fierce protectiveness. This was it, the reason for everything. The attachment charge will be packed in and out. He had no idea that was the final countdown of his life as he knew it. The doctor asked to see Obenar in his office. The air in the room was terrible and cold. The doctor looked uncomfortable, shuffling papers. Mr. Oben, he began, trusting his glasses. "There is complication recording of the blood match." Obenar leaned forward. "Is he okay? Take my blood." "We can't," the doctor said quietly. "Sir, your blood type is O negative. The mother is A positive." "So what?" he asked, confused. "The baby is V positive." The doctor dropped the pump shaft. "Biologically, an O negative father and an A positive mother cannot produce a B positive child. It is genetically impossible." The world spun. The silence was deafening. Obino whispered, "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, sir, the doctor said
that you are not the father of this child. The world crashed. The child wasn't his. The legacy was a lie. Obina stormed out of the office, a man possessed. He didn't take the elevator. He ran up the stairs to the maternity ward. He burst into the room. Aneka was on her phone, whispering hurriedly. She looked up, saw his face, and she knew. She didn't cower. She didn't cry. She hung up the phone and smiled. A cold, reptilian smile. "You know," she stated flatly. It wasn't a question. "Whose is it?" Abina roared, lunging for her but stopped by the hospital security guards who had followed him. "Does it matter?" She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "You wanted a baby so bad, Abina. You were so desperate. You were so easy. I will kill you," he screamed, struggling against the guards. "You can't touch me," she hissed. "And you can't touch the money either. It's already moved." She waved her phone. "My cousin, the real father, is waiting downstairs. We are leaving." Obina was thrown out of the hospital. He drove home like a madman, running red lights, desperate to salvage something. He sprinted into his house. It was quiet. Too quiet. He ran to the master bedroom. The closet was empty. Her clothes, her jewelry, the expensive bags, gone. He ran to the hidden wall safe behind the painting. He punched in the code. It didn't work. She had changed it. He smashed the keypad with a heavy statuette until the lock gave way. He wrenched the door open, empty. Not just cash. The deeds, the bonds, the jewelry he had given her, all gone. He checked his phone. Notifications flooded in. Transfer complete. Transfer complete. 0 bonds. She hadn't just left. She had liquidated him. He collapsed on the floor of the empty room. The silence of the house pressing down on him like a tombstone. The next few days were a blur of police reports and lawyers. It was hopeless. Aneka had power of attorney. The transfers were technically legal.
She had fled the country, likely to a non-extradition zone, with her lover and a child. Obina was ruined. The bank foreclosed on the match within the month due to unpaid loans, and Neka had taken out against the property. Obina, the great merchant, was reduced to squatting in a friend's guest house. His mother, Mama Ada, suffered a stroke from the shock and was bedridden, muttering about the devil woman. Obina spent his days drinking cheap gin, replaying the last 5 years. Thought of Amada, the woman he called barren, the woman he cast aside. He realized now, with sickening clarity, that the infertility was his. He was the dry tree. He had thrown away a diamond to pick up a piece of glass that cut his throat. 6 months later, a disheveled Obina was walking through the market of the neighboring town looking for deliver. He looked older, broken, his charisma gone. Across the street, near a park, he saw a familiar figure. It was Amara. She looked radiant, fuller and healthier. She was laughing, holding the hand of a man who looked at her with adoration, and strapped to her chest in a colorful carrier was a sleeping baby. A baby looked exactly like her. Obina stopped, his breath hitching across the street. She was a mother. She had always been fertile. Amara looked up, and their eyes met across the busy streets. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked complete. She gave him a small, pitying nod, then turned back to her husband and child, walking into the sunlight. Obina stood in the shadows, watching the family he should have had, realized he had been the architect of his own hell. He turned away alone as the dust of the market settled around him.